Good morning, everyone. My name is Jason Donati, and I'm a professor in animation and media arts here at Northeastern. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to the From Graphics to Narrative, Animation and News Storytelling panel. We are super lucky to have four incredible animators, media artists, motion designers, art directors. Does that cover everything? Yeah. Here with us today to talk about the world of animation, the power and impact it can have on news and the stories you want to tell. Hopefully, through the next hour or so, we'll get to peek behind the curtain a little bit, get a sense of the tools, techniques, processes, workflows that they use every day, and maybe even get to look inside their crystal ball and hear a little bit about the future of animation and news, at least from their perspective. So without further ado, I'll hand it off to the panel for their introductions.
And I will just say real quick too, we'll have a little bit of time, I think, towards the end, if you all want to, have questions about any specific things we might go over during the slides. But yeah, just to start us off, Gabby.
Hi, you might have already seen my work here and there, but my name is Gabby. I was one of the fellows, part of the RLTVN project. So I was mainly working with the other producers in the 3 different stations last year. And I was working remotely with them, so kind of coordinating between all of them and doing their motion graphics for them. Oh, and this is my slide, kind of highlighting a little bit of the work that I've done. But I would call my style mixed media machinations. I really like to bring in different kind of influences and sources, from photos to 3D to illustrations, kind of mix them all together to create one unique style as I'm working on different animations. But I always try to pull different aspects from the stories and bring them into the graphics, so it kind of creates this link, this connection between the two. So yeah, I'll hand it off to
me. So yeah, I'm Adriana Aguilar. You all have seen me being kind of obnoxious and asking a lot of questions, but I'm a visual content producer for ABC. I am a part of the national data team for ABC. I actually got started in news because of this fellowship alongside my counterpart, Bob, in the first phase of the project. My role was a lot of pioneering and defining what it meant, but over time we found it worked really best with investigations type work, a lot of complex topics, and I do a lot of data viz nowadays too, being with the data team as well. So a lot of what I do is basically this. And then when we don't have video, we will do a lot of that, which is more explainer style content, which we'll have Joey talk a little bit more about later.
Hi, I'm Bob, as Adriana said. Like her, I was also a fellow for the Reinventing project back all the way in 2019. I worked at the Boston's Hearst station, WCVB, Channel 5. I worked primarily I worked primarily under Mike Bodette and the investigations team. We quickly figured out that animation was very helpful for their stories, for telling complicated stories. And from there, I leapfrogged from CVB to Hearst Television Inc., working on national stories for their explainer series that I helped pitch and produce called Clarified. These 2 graphics are from that series. One regarding the anniversary of the Vietnam War, explaining the political maps regarding it, and this one up here was about another short explainer regarding NRA political funding. Most of my work, I say geography in jeopardy, because I've learned how helpful map graphics are to tell very complicated, both historical and current events, political events. So yeah, thank you.
Hi, I am Joey. I am the art director for Vox.com. I used to be just art director for video. Now I kind of just oversee everything, podcast, the website, all of the branding stuff. But I started as a motion designer at Vox. I am from the Philippines. I moved to New York 3 years ago. But for a long time, I was working remotely with Vox as a contractor from overseas, which was crazy. It's a long story how that happened. But now I'm here. I live in New York now. But the funny thing is, I still work remotely, and I don't get to see my coworkers a lot. But it's fun. It's fun. It's fun to be working in media, and Vox has always been like a big inspiration for what I was doing, and it's just still surreal to me that I'm able to do stuff for them now and kind of represent them in things like this. And so happy to be invited here, and just some of the couple of stuff that I've worked on for Vox in the past. And yeah, that's it. I'm gonna talk more later, but yeah.
But basically, we want to talk about the power of animation, the kinds of stories it can tell, and the next slide being that animation, you want to go into it without thinking of your limits.
Yeah. So as animators, we've all found like it really has opened a door on the kinds of stories that we can tell. Like you can do a lot with video, and just explaining, but most people are very visual, so it helps to have that visual component which animation can bring to the table. I ended up pulling a couple of examples of some of my previous work, and just kind of showing like how it can be used.
Create a Freedmen Affairs Agency to oversee administering reparations passed by both chambers and signed into law by the governor. Eligible recipients would have to trace their lineage to an African American enslaved in the country. Promote black home ownership by providing down payment assistance and property tax relief. Compensate families displaced by racially motivated land taking through eminent domain and other tactics, like the Johnsons in Russell City. Expand access to career technical education. Provide higher education financial aid for redline communities. Prohibit involuntary servitude for incarcerated people and restrict solitary confinement in prisons. Expand and protect access to healthy foods in under-resourced neighborhoods, and issue a formal apology by the state for human rights violations and crimes against humanity on enslaved Africans and their descendants.
Here's how it works. Since 1924, when local law enforcement scans a person's fingerprint, the departments automatically share those fingerprints with the FBI's Identification Division, checking to see if they match suspects wanted on out-of-state warrants or a suspect's criminal history. But in 2008, the Secure Communities program created a pipeline from ICE into the FBI's data, giving immigration agents unlimited access to the data the FBI obtains.
The second one especially is one one of the more common types of animation that I'll have to do on a day-to-day basis. Basically, like closer to something like, especially I work from broadcasts in broadcast. So what that means is we do a lot of stories every single day. Our turns are very quick a lot of the times, so this is usually something that I do on a day turn basically. So it helps tell that kind of like when we were doing all the migrant stories, we were talking about how like ICE was able to get all this information about migrants. Like we were hearing all these reports about all these people getting arrested and going under ICE custody and whatnot. So this was explaining how like basically like certain policies from decades ago, enabled ICE to quickly get information from local police departments routed through the FBI. So yeah.
When we're talking about like complicated stories with multiple actors that really you cannot tell with video alone, or interviews and stuff that is just overly complicated and the average viewer needs a visual aid. Many people are visual learners, and at the end of the day, a story that needs animation is one that is complicated and can be better told and more accurately told via the use of graphics.
Yes, and then to the last point, not every story needs animation. There are some stories, I think like the keynote speaker yesterday kind of highlighted really well, where it's just like, I think Vox does a lot of stories where it's primarily visual. And then, that encompasses a lot of stories, but it's not every story. And then, I think we were gonna dive a little bit into the process of how do we do all of this.
Brass tacks.
And then also what we've all found has been like common themes amongst, what kind of, how our work is used.
So basically, if you aren't sure where to kind of put animation in your story, these are kind of like the basic uses that will be useful for any kind of story that you can just kind of put in graphics and help the viewer understand your topics more. So that can range anything from graphic or mapping, data visualization is a very common one, historical topics where you're filling in places where you don't actually have the video, and also like explainers, obviously. Are the most common.
And then, so we're going to dive a little bit into the process, and we have like the masters of explainer right here with us with Joey. So he's going to walk us through his process a little bit.
Hello. So yeah, I'm going to be very brief, but just going to take you through my thinking process when we make these things and we prepare visuals for Vox. I sometimes think twice a little bit when I describe what I do as animation, because like it is animation in a way, but it's also moving graphics. It's just that. So they could be like in our industry, they could be like used interchangeably a lot. But what we do exactly is we at Vox, that what we've been doing for the past like 11 years at Vox Video is just a lot of motion graphics, and that just means like a lot of After Effects, like designing something and using motion to aid that, like the way you communicate that information to your audience. So can you just get back to that previous slide?
Oh, okay.
Previous slide. Yeah. So we have only like two goals. All right. There's just like two guiding principles for me as art director at Vox. Like this is basically my job is, one is to hide the boring, and second is to define constraints. And a lot of our Vox producers and animators are very talented in their own right. So it's just my job to kind of just lay out the constraints, lay out what you can do and what you can't do, and kind of just let them be creative in their own ways. Okay, let them just figure it out. Cool. There you go. Next slide, please. And these may be some of the questions that I'm asking when we're starting a project. What are we trying to do here? Are we decorating? Are we designing charts? Are we, designing supporting visuals? Are we just highlighting evidence? Are we just does this need to be accurate? Does this need to be symbolic? So just a lot of like some of the questions that you want to answer when you're starting a project, because it could get really, like it could be a lot thrown at you by journalists, reporters, producers that you're working with. So you kind of just want to figure out like the main point that you're trying to communicate and just focus on that. And these could be some of the questions that you want to ask yourself. So I'll give you an example. This was a couple of months ago, I think, like right before the elections. This was like a quick turnaround video. I think Swati mentioned earlier we take around 2 to 3 weeks to finish one video at Vox, but this one I had like a day after I got the script to figure it out, and it was like, all right, what are the constraints here? Next slide, please. So what are the constraints here? There's a lot of constraints, right? Like first of all, the time. You have like a day to do this video and get it out to the world. Go back. And you kind of just want to focus on the main thing, and the main thing is to be able to visualize how polling works. And speaking to the producers who had written the script, talked to them, and I figured out, oh, the numbers could be hypothetical, but the math has to make sense visually. So now I had to do like a lot of just honestly like a lot of math within After Effects, some coding. I don't code, by the way. But it's a lot of going to YouTube, like figuring out how to do these things. That's like 80% of my job. But I figured out how to do that, and this is the next slide, please. This how.
So if each individual in a poll starts off with a value of 1, weighting is when people who are underrepresented compared to the larger population get a value higher than 1, while groups who are overrepresented get a smaller value. So if a sample was made up of 60% women and 40% men, pollsters make the women count less and the men count more to match the fact that about 52% of US voters are women, while 48% are men. They repeat this for factors like age and race and geographic location too, until each individual is weighted in a way that makes the sample a good stand-in for the larger population it represents.
This is another one. I was talking about hiding the boring, but this was like pretty interesting to me. But you can't see that yet. It's just a document of a congressional hearing, like way back when, but they have like a written record of it. It's cool, right? It's like a visual evidence that this actually happened. And then next slide. And then I zoom in and it's like, oh, this is cool because I have their names. And I have like, whatever they said in this debate. And it kind of looks like a group chat. So I was like, all right, let me figure out a way to make this not look like a document. And, and this is kind of where I ended up, but hopefully it plays.
Before Congress passes the 14th Amendment, as they debate it, they actually keep pretty good records of their conversations. For example, one senator asks the rest of the Senate, "Won't this give citizenship to the children of Chinese people?" Another senator says, "Yes, the child of an Asian is as much a citizen as the child of a European."
The debates over the 14th Amendment matter because they...
Yeah, basically, so I kind of turned it into this, text bubble, almost like, an iPhone like group chat situation, which my producer loved. But like that's just like one way to, you don't really need all of the other information. You've already shown that this document exists. What I did was just like to cut out to grab like to clip out some of the statements from the document, so you get a lot of that texture still, so that that it's still coming from that document. But now you have them in this like new, like modern-ish world that, I don't know, YouTube might love. Next one, please.
We saw one night, the night before, a movement of lights, armored trucks moving around, moving like this. So we know that something is wrong. That's why we knew that something is going to happen to our village.
On April 9th, 1940.
This is a very different video. This is there's a more narrative-driven like interview that we did, but basically we didn't have any kind of like any photos or videos to support what the guy being interviewed was saying. So the key in animation here was to kind of mirror what he was saying, but also like allow some respect to the story, because I wasn't there. I don't know what happened, but like to make it like minimal enough that you could kind of just reflecting the narrative that he's saying. So this is more like an emotional reflection of basically the soundbite that I have here.
Now here's China's population over the last 60 years. Even after losing almost 1 million people in 2022, its population is still about as big as it's ever been, 1.4 billion people. But that's projected to shrink by nearly half by the end of the century. Over the years, China's growth and policy...
So there's another one like where I feel animation does help a lot is with data viz, and it's a way for you to just like shrink time, like extend time, like focus on a certain period of time in this like timeline chart situation. So you're kind of just supporting the narrative that you're saying in the voiceover.
Do you mind if I ask a question?
Go ahead.
One open. So I would love to know, maybe from each of you, but maybe starting with you, because this is something that we've been showcasing the last 24 hours or so. Think about the absolute best favorite producer or manager that you've had. Yeah. How do they come to you with the seed of an idea? What are they bringing to your plate? And I'd love to hear that advice for us who may never grow beyond the Crayola stage. What kind of partnership are you most excited to have?
And Adriana, you can feel free to talk about me.
Yeah, the answer is Neka.
No, at Vox, like everyone is just so, like at Vox Video, everyone is just so capable that you kind of don't have a choice but to trust everyone, and it's just a lot of conversation before even like the producer is writing the script. So it's like they come to me and it's like, oh, is this possible? Or I have this idea, and then the thing about Vox Video is there's never like a locked cut of the video until like the very end of the process, which is like the most inefficient way to produce videos. But I think everyone does that anyway. But so it's just like really close communication and a relationship where everyone kind of just respects what everyone is able to say, whether or not you're an art director or you're a producer. Yeah.
To Phil's point, sometimes I'll say, oh, I'd love to do something on this and give very little direction because I figure she's the artist, so she's going to be able to put it together better than I can. So how, to his point, like how much information do you guys need?
So I don't think in broadcast you get too much time for iteration. So we do try to have a collaborative process, but I think like I am definitely my position is a little unique in the sense that like I guess I have a lot more power to choose how things work, but I have to turn it a lot quicker. But I will say one thing that does help the workflow is having a locked script, because when we have a lot of script changes, that it can cause a lot of changes that don't necessarily need to, it could be more efficient. So
I find that interesting, right? Because you want to lock the script, you want to get in before the script is maybe even end. Mm-hmm. That's an interesting difference.
I will say I think I'm usually involved from the very beginning. So I will usually I will often be at the pitch meetings, the editorial meetings. So I will often be there, and I'm also integrated as part of the data team. So I have a chance to go back and forth and talk about these stories before they actually get into the production. Because like the way we do stories is like a lot of things can be day of, but a lot of things we also have like a list of things that we were going to be doing over the next several months. So like I am involved from the beginning, if that makes sense.
Which is your favorite? Being involved over a long term?
Yeah, no, I prefer, I think like, so, and Nika knows this, we do have like a graphics department, but I think over time, at all the stations that I know of, like there's been a bit of a separation between graphics and editorial that seems to have caused a little bit of friction. And I think it's helpful for graphics folks to be involved because sometimes I'm able, as I'm working on things, I'm able to catch things that kind of slip through the cracks. Because I'm able to look at the chart or the thing or whatever, and it's something slightly off, and I'm able to flag it back to the producer and be like, okay, maybe we rethink the way we do this. So,
I think maybe the best way to cover all the bases of your question is every place is different. Every place has a different workflow, and different members of a company have different relationships to their work. In terms of our favorites, we can think of it as a sort of tier list. My personal favorite thing is to be included at the beginning, during script development. If the goal of this story that you're writing is to include animation, consult an animator as you're writing it. We can best direct you into what sound bites, what pieces of data are best to save animation for, what other parts can we gloss over or are best told via your interview process or video or B-roll. Not to mention, our time is precious, and especially if stories are going fast, one animator only has so much hours in a day to put all their effort into maybe 1 to 3 segments, if we're lucky, of a, say, weekly or even worse, daily story. But otherwise, give us a locked script. If we're not helping you direct the script into how to best use animation, give us a locked script.
So the constraint here was we couldn't use like all the Emory Douglas art that we were going to use originally for this video because we couldn't get rights to it. So the way that we could kind of integrate that art style, which the Black Panther were using in that time, is to just honor it by like doing animation, like illustration that is inspired by that art style. So you can see it here.
December 4th, 1969. Akua Njeri was 19 years old and sleeping next to her fiancé, the Illinois Black Panther Party chairman, Fred Hampton.
The next thing I remember was someone in our room shaking Chairman Fred. Chairman, wake up, wake up. Plaster was flying off the wall. You could smell the cordite from the gunshot. If you've ever been under gunfire, 5 minutes is 5 hours. To you, it seems like forever. The shooting started back again. Then another voice unfamiliar to me said, "He's good and dead now." I knew they were talking about Chairman Fred.
Fred Hampton was murdered by his government. But before that, he was a leader in a movement practicing a new kind of activism. A movement targeted because of its power to unite people.
Beautiful. I
Unfortunately, we don't have 18 extra minutes.
I know. I do have a question for Joey about in terms of process and because like Vox has a very specific style in the way that you narrate. I just want to know like how much input do you have on the way that they write, or like how it works with your animations. I think like sometimes scripts can work really well with the animation, but also like sometimes like do you often make suggestions to visualize the story better?
The good thing about Vox is especially like early Vox, 2016, 17, everyone was just so used to YouTube. Like they had the YouTube voice, like everything. We got AI trained on like former Vox producers now, training on like their voices and just ripping off like straight ripping off Vox videos on TikTok. So like they were early in on that, just like this conversational tone, keeping it fun, not fun, but like, interesting. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but it kind of, there's always just been like a good synergy between like, keeping it conversational and interesting with the art style.
I'll take over on this one. So as the title suggests, the first question you might ask yourself is, does my story need animation? I know we're halfway through the presentation, but this is a good place to start in terms of your process. A few ways to tell you how to get started. Is the tone of your story, would animation match the tone of your story? Another way to phrase that is, would animation be respectful to the story? If you're doing a long-form documentary like Joey showed us about the Black Panther Party, there are ways to have animation, especially in regards to historical stories that are video poor. Another question you might ask is the topic too complex? The more complex your story is, the more likely you'll need animation in order to tell it. Which goes right into, do I have enough footage for my story? If your story is video poor, the more animation you'll need. This story was one of Hearst Television Inc.'s explainer series, Clarified, first nearly fully animated explainer video. This was a collaboration between me and producer at the time, Catherine Laserwitz, as we were writing, and we were tasked with explaining what gerrymandering was up and coming into the 2022 midterm elections as a way of explaining the different ways politicians from state to state design maps to benefit the party currently in power. And at the end, we ask for you to also register to vote. And I'm sorry to say, if you're just learning about registering to vote for the 2022 midterm election, you are late. But nevertheless, let's learn about gerrymandering.
It's the worst example of gerrymandering and the party of power.
These maps disenfranchise voters. They violate the Voting Rights Act, and they are in violation of numerous state and federal laws.
If it feels like you've heard this debate before, it's because you have. Every 10 years, two things happen in the U.S. the census and redrawing congressional districts. The Constitution lays out this process, stating the government must count the population every decade and, based on that number, reconsider voters' congressional districts. That is redistricting, and it happens in every state except the 7 that only have one congressional district. So, who draws these maps? Some states look to commissions, but most leave it up to the state legislatures. And that's where things can get political. Let's take Ohio and New Mexico as examples. In Ohio, Republicans have control of the House and Senate. In New Mexico, Democrats do. In both states, the legislature drafted the maps and then voted on them. And in both, the minority party accused the majority of gerrymandering, or, as it's more commonly known as today, gerrymandering. That word has a long history in American politics, going all the way back to 1812 and Governor Elbridge Gerry of Massachusetts. But the bottom line is, it means drawing maps that purposefully give one party an advantage over the other. In Ohio, the state Supreme Court struck down the first set of congressional maps because the court ruled they were too partisan. And the second version is facing lawsuits. With early voting already underway, this map will probably stand. In New Mexico, the state's Republican Party brought a lawsuit challenging the maps, calling them unfair. That's how districts are drawn, but what do these new maps mean for voters? On a practical level, it means making sure you're registered to vote where you live and confirming where your polling place is. The larger consideration is representation. Do these districts fairly represent the people who live there? States haven't always abided by that. An example to remember is Jim Crow-era voter suppression, like the poll taxes and literacy tests. But states before, during, and after the Civil Rights Movement used redistricting to keep Black and brown Americans from having their vote count. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 banned these practices outright, and anticipating how states could create new discriminatory laws, it also mandated that jurisdictions with a history of discrimination must get federal approval for any changes to their election laws. Congress voted to keep these provisions in place in 1970, 1972, 1982, and as recently as 2007. Then the Supreme Court decided in 2013 in Shelby v. Holder that the federal government overseeing certain jurisdictions' election laws was unconstitutional. Despite that decision, the bulk of the protections from the Voting Rights Act remains in place. However, states still find ways to use redistricting to keep minority communities from having fair representation. One way to counteract that: majority-minority districts, districts in which the majority of a population is a racial or ethnic minority. Redistricting is complicated, with a lot more layers than we could fit into this video, but what you can control is your vote. You can make sure you're registered in time for the 2022 election. To find out more, go to usa.gov/register-to-vote.
One thing I enjoy about that video is we couldn't have told it any other way. We had to use animation. We only had a few examples that we had within our archives of historical B-roll that could have told what gerrymandering is about and who it's targeting. And I'd also enjoy that. I think we basically had every category of animation we listed earlier in there. We had mapping graphics, we had explainer, we had some historical archives or document highlights. And am I missing one? And explainer, so yeah.
So just in general, working with animators, not one template fits all of us. As you've seen earlier, we all have our different ways we go about working with producers and seeing scripts and getting in on the tracks. But in general, I think it's really good to have your animators come in early so that they know what they're working with, so that they can come up with ideas, so that they are aware of what you're working on and kind of can train themselves on the topic and whatever's being covered. And just in general, like animation needs time. You need time to kind of animate everything, create style guides, designs, get the keyframes in there, and just develop the animation. And so this is an example of, I was trying something new. I wanted to do like a 3D environment with the Weathercaster in there and showcase kind of something different than just the simple 2D animation. So this took a little bit more time than like straight 2D would take, but I feel like I was kind of proud of the result and wanted to iterate more on it. We filmed the weathercaster in front of a green screen and basically brought the green screen into Unreal Engine, and I basically built the environment around him and added the graphics in it.
We are still talking about this blizzard today because this is what happened. You see, over 2 days, snow fell at up to 4 inches per hour, bringing the total to 27.1 inches of snow in Boston. Now you throw in those winds that topped out near 83 miles per hour and an ocean surge from an already swollen astronomically high tide, over 4 high tide cycles that crippled coastal communities, and this became the storm by which all other storms are measured.
So yeah, basically what kind of ended up taking more time is just like finding the 3D like buildings in the back, building the trees, and adding the particle and snow effects. So yes, and then that's Bob.
Animation needs time. That much is simple. I have done, we've all done graphics that we've had them assigned to us at like 10 a.m. and we've had to hand them before end of day, and that is insane. Doing that multiple times is going to lead to burnout. We do not recommend. As was stated yesterday, let's say a average explainer video is going to take anywhere between 1 and 3 weeks. This is an example of a story that I pitched that what happened was our team, we lost both our writers within the span of a month, and they entrusted several of us on the team to pitch and write scripts that were deemed evergreen and topical. And one I chose, one that I'm passionate about, is gun violence across America. One problem with this topic is that, one, it's very data heavy, so it has a lot of research before you even get into the brass tacks of animation. And given that all the animation is based off of that data, that gives it more time it needs to produce. And if you're ever doing anything about gun violence in America, know that the topic is ever evolving from day to day.
In Massachusetts, with a population of 6.9 million people. In Missouri, you can buy an AR-15 at 18 years old with no mandatory waiting period, no extreme risk law, no restrictions to domestic abusers, and no safe storage laws. The Giffords Law Center gives the state an F. In Massachusetts, you have to be at least 21 to buy an AR-15. And while there is no mandatory waiting period, there are extreme risk laws, restrictions for domestic abusers, and safe storage laws. The Giffords Law Center gives Massachusetts an A-. Since 2009, Massachusetts has had 2 mass shootings, Missouri 7. So states can do a lot to protect themselves from gun violence, but there are as many roadblocks as there are solutions. One of those roadblocks being other states. According to the City of Chicago's latest gun trace report in 2017, over half of all recovered guns used in crimes were bought from neighboring states, with less regulation over firearms. The top offenders being Indiana at 21% of recovered guns, Mississippi at 5.1%, and Wisconsin at 4%. So even a state like Illinois, graded at an A-, can't do much to stop guns from pouring in from neighboring states.
And we're highlighting this for the sake of time. If you saw in that short, like a 1.5-minute segment, we have several map graphics. We're conveying information by several third-party watchdogs in terms of how we're grading states. We're placing the locations of these tragedies, and we're also talking about complex ideas in the span of maybe 5 seconds of discussing how one state with pretty good gun laws is still affected by their neighbors with relatively poor ones. That's a lot. Not only is that a lot of research, that's a lot of design of how to convey these complex ideas in a short amount of time, and we're doing that over and over again across multiple shots in such a short amount of time. That amount of design and research takes time. So be aware of how much time you're willing to budget for any one explainer video. Next, we're going to talk about the tools we have that you'll want to provide your animators with.
Yeah, some of the ones we use, except Canva. We had a big conversation about it yesterday.
Everyone keeps asking us about Canva.
I don't think any of us really use it. However, I think Bob put it very succinctly yesterday. I think they're good training wheels if you don't have time or to learn a whole new specialization.
Yeah, but I feel like overall, like our bread and butter is After Effects and like the other Adobe programs to support After Effects. But Bob is trying to get away from Adobe programs, so he's starting to use Calvary, which is kind of like a rival to After Effects.
Why away from Adobe programs?
Personally, I'm having a messy divorce with them because I personally disagree with their ethics as a company, their pricing model, scraping artists' tools for generative AI, and at the end of the day, I'm cheap, and I want to lean more into free and open source software that I feel I can more accurately determine the direction that software is going to go rather than a larger corporation software like Adobe. That's not to say I haven't used it my entire professional career, and I highly appreciate it, but at some point I need to future-proof my workflow. So currently I'm opening my doors to products like DaVinci Resolve, which has a free and a subscription professional model, as well as Calvary, which I'm attempting to replace After Effects with, which also has a free and professional subscription model, or even things that are a bit further out of scope, like Blender, which is open source. Not to say that I haven't used most of my work with paid software like After Effects and paid plugins like GeoLayers, which I do most of my mapping work in.
Yeah, just a quick note, After Effects and Cinema 4D, specifically for TV, and even a lot of digital storytelling, those are pretty standard across the industry at the moment. That could always change though, tools always change. And I think like we're probably gonna get a little bit into it in the process section, but because like I think one of the questions probably all of us get asked all the time is just what tools do you use? Tools are important. It's important to stay on top of what's going on across the industry and whatnot, and especially in animation with things changing and whatnot. There's always something new to learn. But I think personally, at the end of the day, if you have strong design skills, that's going to get you, that's going to allow an easier transition, because no matter what, good design, no matter what tool you're using, that's what's gonna.
Which brings us back to Canva if you must. If your team is small, if you don't have a budget for an artist, feel free to use the training wheels.
Just to jump in real quick, we're at the end of the regular time. I know we started a little late, but we probably have about 10 minutes left.
Just in general, like what's coming, the future of news is heading towards independent production. We've already kind of heard kind of this feel from a lot of the other presenters already, so we don't need to recap as much. But as we mentioned, free and open source programs are on the rise, and smaller, content creator-based content is coming out. Streaming and social media are here to stay, and right now there's no replacement for quality work. AI can't do what we do. And it's definitely important to have an artist there, to have artists supporting productions and creating these animations. And yeah, animation is needed to tell these kind of complex stories that we want to present to our audiences. Yeah.
I think we'll use the remainder of our time to open up to questions that anyone may have. Otherwise, we have Jason, our moderator, to open the discussion.
So does anybody have one right off?
Don't use Canva personally, but I do want to ask you guys about it, because especially a lot of the students, a lot of people who don't have a social media team, a graphics team, use it. I understand that it's training wheels, but can you kind of explain to me why it's training wheels, or why?
Yes.
why it's if you must, and this is a genuine question.
More than anything is that it relies very heavily on templates, and usually for like stories can vary so much. You're not gonna be able to find everything you need in a template. So more often than not, like what all of us do is customize work, because you can't just simply find that. If it works for like simple things, that's great. So, but like a lot of the work that we do, it would require a little bit more time and attention. The other thing too is Canva doesn't necessarily always adhere to whatever branding your company uses. So, like Vox has a very signature style, even though their videos look very different from one another, have like a certain, like they render at a certain, the frame rate is very specific, like their look is very specific. You're not really gonna be able to get that from just Canva.
In short, you're locking yourself in. You're not giving yourself a lot of options for your work to have its own aesthetic, its own flavor, its own thing that makes your work your work. And we fully understand. It's people are using it because it's either cheap or free, or the UI is easy to pick up right away. That's fully understandable, and that's why I'm aiming to call it training wheels rather than to shame anyone for using it. Right. It's a great first step. It's a great way to get you to understand how different creative softwares work, and I implore you not to end your creative journey at Canva.
We need to think of it more like a template library versus like a design app, because it really is that. And if your newsroom needs it, you need like people with who are not very design savvy, and you want to just make templates for them. Just can drag and drop stuff, and cool. But I don't think it is a very intuitive as a design app. I actually think it's more complicated. So I honestly, you'd be better off spending a week learning Photoshop or Illustrator.
Yeah, and nowadays there's so much content on YouTube that will teach you all the basic steps of getting into After Effects, getting into Illustrator and Photoshop. So I feel like if you have an hour a day or just a week to set aside and learn it, I think it'll take you so much further.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Okay, fill in the back.
What do you see from other animators, amateur or professional, that you hate?
I have one. I hire all the time. You can tell right away if they're compensating by doing all this fancy motion stuff. I always just say when I do these talks, just be a designer first. You don't need to animate, honestly. So just be learn composition. That'll guide you through that'll help you with photography. That'll help you with the social assets that you're doing. That'll help you with everything. And as long as you just get back to the basics, and none of this you can really tell when you're doing all these fancy motion that you don't really need at all. The way I use my After Effects is almost just like a camera, where I'm kind of just moving things around and focusing on certain parts of the visual that I'm showing my audience. So, yeah.
I have one too. For me specifically is so the art community is, if you're involved in it, it's pretty small, and it's evolved a lot from what it used to be. I think it's become a lot more welcoming, which is great, but there has been a prevailing I don't know, just habit in the art community to have pissing contests with each other. Thankfully through time it's evolved a little bit more about just helping each other through Discord communities and art communities and stuff like that. So that's been really great. But I think especially if you go to school for art and whatnot, you'll find that still being very prevalent. So I think what one thing I always try to emphasize is the people that your peers, whether it's in school or at work, you might see them eventually. So I think you should be kind. You shouldn't be a butt.
So you hate flash and substance. You hate disrespect.
I would say my pet peeve is don't copy trends for the sake of copying trends. Create your own look, really understand the story, really do your research and make something unique, because a trend is a trend. It's popular, it's flashy, whatever, but it's not going to set you apart from everyone else. That's basically it, yeah.
It's a very good question. I hate AI art, specifically the generative art you get from software like Midjourney, OpenAI, ChatGPT. Anytime I see a business having used that in place of paying for stock footage or stock photos, the first thing I think of is they're cheap, or they can't afford an artist, in which case I don't feel comfortable doing business with them. And this might be something that I only have trained eyes for. I don't know how much the average person is able to spot a generative art, either one that's meant to look like an artist took it, or something that's more photoreal. But to me, it's just very obvious. It's very uncanny. I just don't like it, and I don't like the business around it. So that's my take.
Yeah, overall, I think with AI specifically, I don't think it's at a place where, where you see it being used most is in places that produce very low quality work. That's what I'll say. Usually the high quality work, you'll still have a designer going through everything and making those decisions.
Let me just have one more thing, just supporting what Gabby was saying earlier about not following trends. One thing that I do when I do start these projects, like, you're used to like just grabbing all these icons from Shutterstock or whatever. So I just search up like, I don't know, whatever icon that I want to do, search it up on Google, look at what everything looks like, and not do it. Like, get away from that. Do it the other way. Like, do it like a unique way. Find a more bespoke way to do it. And yeah, it's almost like counterintuitive, right, to what we're used to. But I think that really has helped me a lot in my career.
We have time for one more question. I think I saw your hand. There you go.
Yeah, so in the general public, the animation is seen as something that skews towards a younger audience for kids. But obviously that's not the case, and animation can be used for more heavier subjects. But what I'm wondering is, what's your thought process adapting these darker, more tragic stories into animation, and how you do that in a way that you find respectful and meaningful and still informative and fun to do, at least animation-wise.
Okay, do you want to talk about your experiences with?
The missing chapter. The good thing about working at Vox is you have a lot of journalists around you. So we do like gut checks all the time. So at the very start of that process, I'm sending them style frames. These are like kind of more drawn up storyboards. So I show them like, oh, this is what I have. What do you think about it? So there's like maybe a couple of people that I really trust within their newsroom that I show it to, and they get back to me with notes. And like, but most of the time we've been doing this for a long, long time, where we kind of get it. And also about animation being skewing towards a younger audience. Like, I don't know, millennials are old now, so and we still like animation. So.
Also, funny, interesting fact about animation history, like a lot of the cartoons were originally geared towards adults, but they just became a hit with kids. But, so like there's always been an animation crowd among adults. So there's that. But to this, I want to add, at ABC, and I work very closely with the journalists and whatnot, but being integrated with our data team as well. What's helped me as well is just being very involved and very up to date with what's going on amongst as many communities as I can. I think for me, it's something that's just become more of a passion, like the journalistic side. So I no longer view them as like a separate thing. It's just like they kind of go together. It's like whenever I have a concern about a story or a topic alongside a reporter, I make sure that I voice that with them. And I guess it's in a way is similar to what you meant, doing like the gut checks and whatnot. But in general, I also just try to be informed. And that helps me understand, like, what are these communities, like, would this be insensitive? Would this be stigmatizing or dramatizing some sort of issue?
All right, I think we've come to the end. How about a round of applause?